Ricky Ponting, it's great to have you on SEN. Welcome.
Morning, Gerard. How are you, mate?
I'm well. I felt last night in that gathering of cricket lovers, there is a glow associated with this World Cup victory that we are all sharing in. Could you detect that?
Oh, absolutely, and rightly so. I mean, it's an amazing achievement for that group of players. You know, that particular group have been together. Well, most of them have been together for a long time. They've actually had a lot of success. You think back to the last T20 World Cup. A lot of the guys that played in this one were in that. The World Test Championship, the Ashes that's just gone. You know, a lot of those players have been through those campaigns as well. And when things got off to a slightly rocky start at the start of this World Cup, and that they weren't playing well, and India are sort of we're definitely the standout team of the tournament going into that final. For the Aussie boys to do it again when it matters most, on the biggest stage, and play their best game for the tournament in front of 130,000 Indians, it has to be said. They deserve to take a lot of credit for it. Pat himself, is still a pretty young, inexperienced captain, even more so probably in the white ball formats. For him to get everything right on the day, and the boys to get behind him and play the way they did, it was great to be there and be a part of it all.
So your experience there, had you experienced anything quite so immense as how it built up?
No, never. I mean, the day of the final, that stadium in Ahmedabad holds 130,000 people. Pre-game, I was doing the pre-game show with Dinesh Karthik, and we were standing about 1.5 meters apart, and I literally couldn't hear a word he was saying. The atmosphere that was created around that stadium that day was, you had to be there to really get a full feel what it was like. I've been lucky to play at the MCG and pretty full crowds for a number of games, and nothing compared to what it was like that morning. And it went up and down because with India's success or failures on the day, the noise of that crowd sort of seesawed up and down for the day. And the last hour and a half of Australia's batting innings, it's fair to say that things were pretty quiet around that stadium.
How defining an achievement is it in the leadership of Pat Cummins, Ricky?
Yeah, look, I think it's huge, Gerard. There's been question marks, if you like, from different parts of the media, and talking about, is he the right man for the job? And no fast bowler's done it, for a long time for Australia. And can he hold up? Will he know how to use himself best? And will he know how to make the right bowling changes at the right time? Whatever, but I think any of that questioning of his leadership abilities has got to go out the window now, because he's certain moments in big, whether it's an Ashes series, World Test Championship, or even a couple of games in that World Cup, he was not out with the bat in a couple of really tricky situations. And I thought his effort with the leadership tactically and the way that he bowled in the final, he saved his best game for last as well, and that's the sign of a really good leader that's got a group of guys behind him that are he's the Pied Piper, and the rest are following.
How big a part of folklore will the decision to bowl first in a World Cup final be?
Yeah, it will be. It's sort of the un-Australian way, if you like, isn't it? We were talking about that last night, that normally Australians would look to turn up in a big game in particular and want to win the toss and bat first and post a total and put some scoreboard pressure on. But if when you looked at the wicket, you probably if you looked at the wicket and you had no idea about the dew that was going to come later on, it would have been a bat first wicket all day because it was so dry and so slow. But the Aussies had been there a couple of days before the final. Obviously, they played England there in one of their round games about 3 weeks earlier, and that ground particularly did get wet at about 8:30 in the evening, which is sort of 15, 20 overs into the second batting innings, is when the dew really started to come down. It was quite heavy, and that makes batting so much easier, and obviously bowling, in particular spin bowling, so much more difficult. And that's where England come undone. They didn't get enough runs on the board when they had to bat first, and with the dew coming in, it sort of negated their spin options they had in Kuldeep Yadav and Jadeja. So tactically, Pat, as I said, was awesome, and I think it will be. And even on the day, it was talked about a lot in the commentary box as to what he should do first, bat or bowl, but he got it absolutely right.
You've been there for so many of the great defining moments of this calendar year as Australia became World Test champions. The Ashes were retained and all the controversies associated with that. The World Cup, there was the Test series in India. Just before we cast an eye to what comes next, how What an odyssey 2023 has been for the Australian cricket team. How have they come through it?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been that. I mean, even when you think about it right now, Gerard, the fact that they're still in India, I think they've been on the road for over 80 days now as a group. They only had a couple of days to celebrate a World Cup, which for most of them would be their absolute career highlight. Some of them might have celebrated a little bit harder than others, hence missing the first couple of T20 games in India. But, they've got a couple of games to go, then they're back home, and literally only got a couple of day turnaround before they head over to Perth. I think they're in camp in Perth on the 9th of December, starting to get ready for the first Test match of the summer. So look, it's been a huge year for them, calendar year, and fortunately or unfortunately, probably unfortunately for them, it's coming around pretty quickly again. But fortunately for us, that get a chance to watch these boys play and talk about them and critique what they do. We've only got another sort of couple of weeks to wait before the Australian Test match summer rolls around.
So what will we see is you were very generous with your insights last night, so I might ask you some of those questions that everybody wants to hear your view on at the moment. Should Dave Warner be there at the start of the Test summer opening?
Yeah, look, I think he deserves to be there at the start of the summer, but then I think it's up to him. I mean, I've read some reports this week about the farewell tour and having 5 tests in the summer and finishing in Sydney in front of his home crowd. I mean, that's all up to David, really. I mean, I don't think anyone can ever be guaranteed that sort of a run in, and no one can be guaranteed the fairy tale retirement either. So it's up to him. If he scores runs in the first few games, then he'll most likely get that send off that he's after. But there are a few guys sort of queuing up behind him that have been doing a lot of things right in domestic cricket to get their chance to open the batting. And I mean that time will obviously come, but when we'll wait and see, and we'll probably have a clearer picture after that first Test match in Perth.
Are you left to ponder whether the selectors and the Brains Trust really trust any of the 3 openers who have been auditioning for a while and have had looks, Bancroft, Renshaw and Harris?
Yeah, I see that sort of question's sort of ramped up, hasn't it, a bit, or that speculation's ramped up a bit the last couple of days with some talk about Marnus potentially going up and opening the batting and trying to find a way to get Green back in the side as quickly as possible. I actually don't believe in that. I think that I think Cameron Green might just have to sit back and bide his time and wait for the opportunity to come back and get a truckload of runs in Shield cricket and sort of force his way back into the side, because it just to me doesn't feel right that they're almost trying to, and if you think, and part of the reason why I say that is Labuschagne's been outstanding at number 3 for Australia. It's very much a specialist position. If they moved him up, they'd probably have to move Smith up to 3. He's always been that sort of 4 batsman. So it all sounds great in theory, to get one of the most talked about and talented young all-rounders back into the side as soon as possible, but create some potential issues along the way as well. So I personally, and I don't know which way the selectors will go, but personally I would leave the batting order where it is and pick one of the specialist openers and give them a crack now. And unfortunately, that would mean that Green would just have to sit back and wait a while. Are
you less sold on Green's Test match batting than you are his bowling?
I think probably what I've seen so far. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there's some talent there. I'm not sure he's really not some talent there. There's a lot of talent there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying how good a cricketer Cameron Green is, but I think he's just probably struggled to find his rhythm and tempo a little bit in the Test match game. We've seen him come out and look to dominate some attacks early, and he's got out. Was other times we've seen him come in and be really, really cautious and not look to play hardly any shots at all. So I think it's just we've got to remember with him, he's a young man still trying to find his way at international level, and coming in at number 6 in the batting order is not an easy place to bat either for someone that's batted predominantly higher than that through their career. So. But I mean, the overall package, it's very, very appealing. And if you're that tall, we can bowl sort of over 140 k's an hour and get some shape with the new ball and the old ball. Then I've really liked what I've seen with his bowling, and I think there's just a few little areas that with his batting that he's got to work on.
Post Sydney, if Warner gets that far, do you have a leaning towards one of the 3 contenders, Bancroft, Harris, or Renshaw?
It's a hard one, Gerard, because I don't get to see a lot of first-class cricket. I've seen a few of these guys. I've seen these guys play a little bit of cricket for Australia, and I think the point that you made probably just a couple of minutes ago about Bancroft been there, not really nailed it. Harris has had a few cracks, not really nailed it. Renshaw hasn't been given as many opportunities, certainly at the top of the order, as the other guys have. But I mean, I'd just go on what of what's happened most recently. And if I look at those three guys, then I think it's quite clear that Bancroft's the one that's got the runs on the board, as to say. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go that way. But if I wind the clock back about 6 months, it might have been a slightly different order than what it is now as well. So, I think they probably had Harris as the one that would come back in a while ago. To me now, it sort of feels like there's a bit more of a groundswell behind Cameron Bancroft being first crack.
What do you see in Travis Head, who's made a century in the World Test Championship final, man of the match in the semi-final and the final at a World Cup, his evolution, the way that he's gone about it, and the force that he is in all formats of Australian cricket right now?
Yeah, what I see there is someone that's just playing with absolute freedom. That's the way he's playing, and that's obviously the way he plays his best cricket. I think the first part of his international career, he was sort of juggling with trying to find, a bit like Cameron Green, I guess, like I was just saying, trying to find the right way for him to be successful at the highest level. And I think what we've seen with Travis now is go out and hit the ball right from the start, try and put pressure back on the bowlers from the start of his innings. And the World Cup, a couple of those innings in the World Cup were quite breathtaking, but it's been more his test batting for mine that's really caught my eye the last couple of years. I mean, I think his strike rate in Test cricket the last 2 years is nearly 100, which is quite remarkable, and he's made big scores along with it. And when you make big scores and get them quickly like that, you win games. You set up games, whether it be white ball or Test match cricket, and he's done that really well. So he's, right now he's one of the emerging great talents, I think, in all three formats of the game around the world. That's the way I sort of described him at the end of the World Cup, and I think it's really true. He'll get a bit of a crack at it now. I think in the T20 format, he'll be the one-day opener for a while, and what he's done in the middle order in Test cricket's been awesome. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of his development over the coming 12 months.
The bowling stocks are really clear, the pecking order of the three frontline quicks, and Boland has done so well in behind those. If Australia, across a 7-test match summer, got to a point of playing the next fast bowler, who do you have an eye on?
Yeah, well, it'll be Boland. As soon as one of those guys goes out, Boland will be the next one that comes in, and rightly so. He deserves it. He has not put a foot wrong in any time he's represented Australia in Test match cricket. So, if it is in the Australian summer or when they go to New Zealand, I'm pretty sure Scotty will get the first crack. But there are a couple of other guys that I'm really impressed with. Jai Richardson, for me, is an international bowler all over. He's highly skilled. He's quick enough. He's not as tall as the other guys. He's that shorter, sort of whippier type, Dale Steyn sort of bowler, if you like. Jai Richardson that can swing the new ball, and he's had some issues with his fitness over the last couple of years, but I notice he's back playing for WA now. So I'd be still keeping a bit of a close eye on him. And Spencer Johnson's the other one that I've really liked the look of in his last sort of 12 months as well. Sort of almost burst onto the scene in the BBL last year when he moved up to the Brisbane Heat, got an opportunity up there and was able to close out some games really impressively for them. So, and he's someone that, once again, a tall, probably you have to be 6'4", I'd imagine, Spencer Johnson, and is pushing that, that 145 to 150 k's an hour sort of bracket. So they're pretty exciting, those sort of guys. So, if it was a Stark that went out and they were looking for the left armour, I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't let anyone down if he got a crack at it.
Ricky, I feel like no cricket conversation at the moment can't include Glenn Maxwell, given what he did across a couple of months in India. You've coached him. You've seen so much of him. I'm so curious. I don't know how we'll regard him at the end of it, other than a revolutionary in what he's doing. Whether he could find his way back into a test team in Sri Lanka. Would Australia have the imagination for that? Will he dominate a BBL summer? Just a thought or two on Glenn Maxwell and what he's been doing.
Yeah, that in itself is a really good question. I could see him getting back into a test lineup because of the all-round game that he brings in those conditions. Most of his test cricket has been played in the subcontinent, whether it's India or some games in the UAE when he played against Pakistan. But because of, if he could bat in the middle order and provide that right arm off spin that is and probably has always been very underrated, he could get back into a test. So, the thing with these guys now, Jerry, the hard thing for a lot of the domestic players is actually just getting a good crack at Sheffield Shield cricket. I mean, Glenn himself has probably only played half a dozen Sheffield Shield games in the last 2 or 3 years. So these guys are not really getting a chance to get a bank of runs behind them and push their name up for selection. And that's I think one of the reasons why we're probably not seeing the same amount of runs scored across a Shield season now as we did 15 or 20 years ago, with the Big Bash sitting right in the middle of the Shield season now. It's an interrupted season, and guys don't get a good uninterrupted run at putting a whole lot of runs on the board. So, Max, he could definitely play again. You used the word so brilliantly last night. He's an enigma. That's the only way you can describe him. You never really know what you're going to get. But when he does what he can do, then we've seen 100 off 40 balls against the Netherlands, 200 not out in that game against Afghanistan, which is the most remarkable one-day innings I've ever seen. I've been around a lot of games, watched a lot of games, played a lot of games. I've never ever seen anything like that. And then the other night he does it again. 100 off 40 odd balls to get Australia across the line in an incredible run chase, and does it all in the last over, brings up his 100. I mean, he's done some really special things over the last few weeks, and hopefully there's more of that to come. Even through the Big Bash, if we can get a bit of a glimpse of that through the Big Bash, then I'll be happy, and I'm sure a lot of Australians will be really happy to see it as well.
Yep, I reckon they would. All right, Ricky, so much main event cricket right throughout this year. Now the Australian summer, Pakistan and the West Indies. I guess you've lived this, where you've got the softer local summer. Is there a risk within a team environment that you can be a little bit off, or does playing Test cricket on Australian soil almost guard against that?
No, look, that comes down to the individual, and it comes down to the leadership around that team. And they're pretty resilient, pretty strong group of players around that Australian Test team. And there's always other things there to play for as well. Is it David? It's going to be Davies last summer. Khawaja, and they're not going to play forever either. So there's always other little things to play for, and that it's a very proud group, and I don't think they'll be taking their foot off the accelerator at all. I mean, the one thing I'd be saying to them is that you don't get an opportunity very often in international sport to really impose yourself on opposition and really nail teams. And I reckon they've got a chance in this summer with Pakistan, and who look like they're going to be slightly weakened on the bowling front with Harris Ralph not going to be here. And then the West Indies, we saw them last summer. They're very much in a rebuilding phase around their Test cricket. I'd be saying to go as hard as you can and just really try and bury these teams and win as convincingly as you can.